Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, my name is Bridget Dana, and today I'm going to be answering questions which I have received from the audience. The questions will cover a wide range of topics that will be of interest to the audience, and I'm going to answer them as best I can without having detailed background knowledge. So I'm going into this blindly, please bear with me. But I know that all of you will benefit from hearing my answers to the questions. So let's dive right in. The first viewer has asked, I feel constantly confused and doubt my own feelings. How do I know if I'm being manipulated or if I'm just overreacting? There's a lot to unpack in this question. First of all, I don't know the relationship that she is referring to. Is it a love relationship? Is it a parent-child relationship? Is it a friendship or a work relationship? So that's the first thing that I would like to bring just to the audience's attention. But I'm going to start by saying that it is important to understand narcissistic abuse and its unique impact on the victim. Narcissistic abuse can only take place if there is a relationship and a pattern in this relationship, which involves manipulation, control, and disregard for the victim's feelings or boundaries. Narcissistic abuse can occur in any close relationship. As I have said, it could be partners, friends, families, or even colleagues. But the pattern can be recognized regardless of the context. Now, red flags to look out for in communication and behavior. So, in other words, what patterns are we looking for? There will be definite manipulation tactics. These can take on a wide range and can be anything from gaslighting, which makes the victims doubt their reality, to love bombing, which is on the other end of the spectrum, where they use intense affection and attention to create dependency. And this would typically be in a love relationship, the pattern. Then we have manipulative tactics such as devaluation, where the narcissist may begin belittling or criticizing the victim to make them feel more insecure or unworthy. So the narcissist has to hook you with something. They have to lure you with something. The tactics that they use to lure their victim in a love relationship would be love bombing. In a social relationship would be also love bombing of sorts, because they want to capture your interest and keep your interest in them. If it's a relationship regarding colleagues, boss, your boss and the co-workers, then the boss would typically lure you in with promises of high salary or high bonuses, but these promises typically end up in nothing. So that's empty promises. What other common signs of emotional manipulation can be involved in this relationship if you are confused and doubt your own feelings? So there's typically a feeling of walking on eggshells. As the viewers said, they feel constantly confused as well. So you're constantly confused, you're constantly walking on eggshells. There is an increased sense of self-doubt and a questioning of one's self-worth. In other words, only with aspects to this relationship, not with aspects to other relationships. Then there is a deep sense of guilt and responsibility shifting. So this is where the narcissist blames the victim for any and all issues in the relationship. We have a saying, typically in Afrikaans, that says, or that translates to, if the cat has a litter, then it's also the victim's fault. And then they also typically like to isolate their victims, because if they can isolate and distance their victims from the support network, then their control is enforced. Then there is a psychological and emotional impact on the victim as well. Victims may start feeling very drained, experience very low self-esteem, blame themselves for the abuse, often feel like committing suicide or feel suicidal. And then there is also the concept of trauma bonding. So despite the abuse, the victims feel attached to and protective of the narcissist, which makes it difficult to leave. So all of these aspects need to be looked at in relation to this specific relationship. These aspects are not the totality of it. There's much more that we can use to dissect the relationship to see, is it a narcissistic abusive relationship or not? But I'm just highlighting the starting points. So in other words, this viewer can take these starting points and then they can go and decide for themselves, are they relevant or not? And if they are relevant, then they can start to look for other signs as well. I always say to my clients in the office that I'm not going to be able to empower them with all the information that ever exists on narcissistic abuse. My role is to show them the way, to show them the path, and they need to decide for themselves. Is this the path that they are on, and is this the path that they want to be on? So I sort of look at it like somebody is in the dark, walking in the dark without a light or a torch, and then they come to me and I show them the obstacles in the path, and then they can decide for themselves, are they happy with where they are or not? I also don't typically tell them, oh, you are most definitely involved with a narcissist, because it is not my role to diagnose anybody with anything. I can show them that you could be in a narcissistic relationship, and as a result, this is why you are feeling the way that you are feeling. So if we want to confirm whether it's a narcissistic abusive relationship, as I said, this is up to the viewer themselves. But what would be helpful is for them to start writing down the specific patterns that they are experiencing, even if they are not certain of the narcissistic abuse terms. In other words, manipulation, gaslighting, love bombing. Just write down the scenarios that have happened and how it has left you feeling, so that you can keep track for yourselves, because it's very difficult if you are sitting in front of a counselor, a therapist, and you are receiving a bombardment of information that has not crossed your mind before. It is very difficult for the victim or the client that comes for counseling to connect the dots themselves. But if you come into the session prepared and you have your list of behaviors that you feel, oh, what about this? What about that? Then the session will be less overwhelming, and then it is easier to connect the dots. In other words, when they behave this way, this is what you call it. You call it love bombing. When they behave this way, this is what you call it. You call it manipulation. And then it makes us much easier to connect the dots. So how do you confirm if you are in a narcissistic abusive relationship? There can be a checklist which you can set up for yourself. But it is important to do self-reflection as well, just for yourself. In other words, don't voice these concerns or these manipulative tactics to the narcissist. Do it for yourself so that you can reflect for yourself. How often do you feel crazy or over-emotional? Do you feel, what type of emotions do you feel? Do you feel happy emotions? Do you feel less happy emotions? And for what period of time do you experience these, let's say, negative emotions? Are you feeling regularly invalidated or dismissed, as if you are nothing? Do you feel drained or anxious after interactions with this person? These are some of the questions that you can start asking yourself. And I would like to encourage this specific viewer that posed the question to trust her or his own instincts. Don't let anybody create confusion or doubt in your mind. Trust your instincts. Trust your perception of reality, because the narcissist likes to twist the victim's perception of reality. So trust your own perception of reality. In other words, if you are sure something happened the way it happened, then you need to trust that. And the more that you try to argue with a narcissist, in other words, no, that didn't happen, and then the narcissist will twist it and say, no, it happened like this, you just can't remember properly, or there's something wrong with you, or you always forget. This is just a tactic of them to gaslight you, to make you doubt yourself. And then reach out for support if you recognize any of these patterns, because the person that you go to for support will be able to further show you the path. And then you can decide, do you want to continue this relationship or not? So that is the first question that I have answered. Let's go on to another question. So the next viewer asked, after realizing that I'm dealing with a narcissist, how can I start setting boundaries without provoking or making things worse? So the answer definitely lies in the question from the viewer. Remember, when you start going against a narcissist, things will start getting worse for you. The narcissistic abuse will definitely start getting worse. There are ways to word things to mitigate the abuse getting worse, but you have to be prepared that it will get worse. Oftentimes we see that when the husband and the wife divorce and one of the parties display narcissism, then the other party has a very, very, very hard time with the legal battles and in court. So just know that there are a couple of things that you can do for yourself, actually, to sort of keep things from going way, way, way worse, but things are going to get worse. So there's just a little bit of a reality check. I'm not saying don't set your boundaries. Please, by all means, do set your boundaries, but just have a realistic expectation of what's going to happen when you do set your boundaries. So first of all, I would like to answer the question, why is it important for you to set your boundaries? So remember now, we are talking about a viewer possibly that has been in a long-term relationship with a narcissist. So this is not just something that's been for a couple of months or a year or two. Let's say longer than 2 years. And obviously the viewer has come to the conclusion that they are dealing with a narcissist because this is what they are voicing. But now they want to start changing things. They want to start claiming their power and keeping the narcissist from draining their emotions. So first of all, I would like to congratulate the viewer on realizing that they are dealing with a narcissist. So how can you start setting boundaries? Now, the first thing that I would say on setting boundaries is start small and set clear and simple boundaries. A very, very, very good tactic to try with setting boundaries is to just practice the word no. If it's difficult for the victim to express no, then start practicing in front of the mirror. I know this sounds simple, but remember now, if you are a victim of narcissistic abuse, especially for years and years and years, your self-confidence and your self-worth is very, very low. So it's going to be difficult for you to say no. But what you do is you go and stand in front of the mirror. And then you just practice the word no, no, no. And the more you practice it, the more your throat recognizes the vibration of no. And remember, your throat is also a muscle, and we have muscle memory. And your body retains muscle memory. So if you practice the word no, your throat starts recognizing that word, and it's going to be easier to voice the word no. Also, just keep in mind that no is a complete sentence. In other words, you don't need to say no and then go into a long explanation of why you are saying no. Because the minute that you do that towards the narcissist drains your energy, and you are going to go around and around in circles, and they're going to start gaslighting you, and they're going to start making you doubt yourself, and then it's the cycle of abuse all over again. So to avoid that hamster being on the hamster wheel just the whole time, get off the hamster wheel and just say no and watch their reaction. But do not react towards their reaction. If they keep at it, then you can try phrases, and first of all, practice this as well. You can try phrases like, I don't agree with you, which is a very, very powerful phrase for a victim of narcissistic abuse to use. Because what you are saying is you are voicing your belief system, which the narcissist has tried to take from you. So you can say, no, I do not agree with you, or you can just say, I don't agree with you, and then walk away. Remove yourself from the conversation. Don't stand there and wait for a response. If it's a telephone call, put down the telephone or say, no, I don't agree with you. I am going to go now. I'm going to leave now, and then follow through, leave. So that is one of the ways where you can start to set small, clear boundaries. Also, if they, for instance, keep texting you when you're at work or keep calling you when you are at work, you can state your boundary and say, I'm not going to take your calls between 9 and 5. And if they start using, maybe there's children involved in the relationship and they start using, but what if there's an emergency with a child? You see, then they start making you doubt yourself again. So don't give in to that. I'm sure if it's really an emergency with the children and you are, let's say, a parent of the child, you will know there's something wrong with the child anyway. But if they are taking advantage of the fact that you are at work and they are trying to stop you from doing your work, which is also a tactic of manipulation and control, then you are free to say, you need to stop texting me all day, or I'm not going to answer your texts when I am at work. And also keep the boundaries straightforward and non-negotiable. Don't do it with hesitancy in your voice. That is why I'm saying practice in front of the mirror. So be firm and assert yourself. Think of it the way that you would talk to a dog when a dog is being naughty. All the dog trainers always say, keep your voice firm. In other words, if you're going to say, no, my love, to the dog, then the dog is not going to listen to you and the dog is going to do whatever it wants. So I would equate talking to a narcissist the same as you're going to talk to your pet. In other words, when you are firm, you use your firm voice. And don't hesitate. Don't have a shaky voice. And that is only going to come with practice in front of the mirror. Yes, so I'm talking about keeping boundaries straightforward and non-negotiable, and ensure that they reflect your needs and values rather than what you wish the narcissist would change. Because remember now, the narcissist is not going to change their behavior, and you cannot change the narcissist. The only person that you can change is yourself, and you can change the way that you respond to the narcissist. So what I would like to establish with a viewer is respond, don't react. The minute that you react, there is emotion involved in the response, and the narcissist then uses that to abuse the victim. So keep it non-emotional, keep it factual, and keep it firm. And then what I can also suggest is use neutral language to minimize emotional reactions. So the neutral language, you can, for example, use phrases like, I need some quiet time to focus on my work, rather than saying you are too distracting when I'm working, or you keep distracting me when I'm working. Use I phrases. So phrases that start with I need, I feel, or I am. Avoid using emotionally charged words or explanations, as this can minimize their likelihood of pushing back. So once again, that speaks to what I was saying. Don't bring emotion into the equation when you are stating your boundary. I feel I need some time alone. That is sufficient. You're not accusing anybody of anything. And then back it up. Back it up. Don't state something and then go and do the opposite, because that also sends mixed signals to the narcissist, which is what they want. Because remember, they study your behavior and they study your emotions. And if you are in a long-term relationship with a narcissist, they know exactly how to push your buttons. So once you start using neutral language and you start setting clear and simple boundaries, it's going to throw them completely off, because they are not used to you reacting this way. Another way to limit your reactions and to rather respond is to practice the grey rock technique. You might have heard of this. The grey rock technique is giving a minimal or dull response to the narcissist's attempts to provoke or manipulate you. When you respond without emotion, they often lose interest, and often immediately, because they are not getting an emotional reaction from you. So how does the grey rock technique sound? In other words, what phrases can you use? You can use phrases like, I don't think that's something I want to discuss, or I'm not going to talk about this now. I'll talk about it later when you are calmer. Or I don't agree with you. That's also a grey rock method. And then another grey rock method is just no. But once again, practice these phrases so that you can talk them with an assertive manner. Now, as I said, prepare for pushback, but you need to stick to your boundaries. In other words, if you had said, no, I'm not going to do this now, then you need to follow through. So don't be wishy-washy with your boundaries. State your boundary and then back it up. So that would be my answer for that viewer's question. If you feel uncomfortable with stating your boundary, which is an uncomfortable feeling at first because your body is not used to stating your boundary, your body is used to being a people pleaser and doing exactly what the narcissist wants. But in order to change this behavior, you need to do something different, because the narcissist isn't going to do something different in their behavior, because they keep getting rewards for their behavior from the victim. So if it's a very, very high conflict scenario, such as co-parenting or a work situation, where you can't just immediately walk out or distance yourself from, then I would use the previous technique that I suggested. In other words, document interactions and be specific in your documentation. In other words, on Tuesday, the 25th of December, the year 2000, at a specific time, this and this happened. And you can also use written communication, in other words, of spoken communication. So with written communication, there's a bit more of a trace of what you have said and what their reaction was, or what they have said and what your reaction was. But remember, it's better to respond than to react. And if you use written communication, then it can also reduce the emotional toll on the victim. And then once again, seek support and practice self-care. Because what does the narcissist do? They work to tear down boundaries by targeting your self-esteem and your level of confidence. So you need to maintain your emotional strength. And one of the ways that you do that is practice self-care. I post on my Instagram page some ideas for self-care regularly, just to remind the audience and the viewers and the followers that self-care practice is very important, because this will replenish your energy and your emotional well-being, and it strengthens your resilience, and it makes it easier to maintain boundaries over time. So those are my first two questions that I want to answer. My next question is, I have noticed my narcissistic partner has some strange habits, like needing constant praise or always trying to one-up others. Are these typical behaviors of narcissists, or why do they act this way? Now, this question opens the door for weird and wonderful behaviors of narcissists, which aren't usually a typical narcissistic behavior pattern, but a lot of them actually do this without knowing it. So she or he asked about needing constant praise. Yes, they do need constant praise. Why? Because they didn't receive it as a child. In other words, in order for them to feel validated, enough, loved, they needed constant praise. And this they realized at a very young age, that if they behave this way, they are going to be praised for it. So they would keep asking for praise as well, because it makes them feel good. And remember, the narcissist just wants to feel good about himself. So needing constant praise is when the ego keeps getting stroked. And then they feel good enough and they feel worthy. So this pattern of behavior is established from early childhood on. Always trying to one-up another person is also a way of them feeling good about themselves. In other words, if I can do this, they can do it better. So typically they would also voice this. Oh, that one thinks they can do this, but I can do way better. You also see this with competitive people in sports. I wouldn't necessarily say all narcissists, but narcissists like to be very competitive, and in sports as well. So they will always criticize the sports players. So that is one of the weird habits that we can attribute to narcissism. It's their need for admiration, their competitive nature, and the constant need to be the center of attention. Because remember, if they aren't the center of attention, in their mind, they don't count for anything. And they will go to extreme lengths to remain the center of attention. Other weird and wonderful things that they do, which might seem like a small or random behavior, is walking ahead of you in public. They will hardly ever walk next to you. This is a calculated way to assert control over their victim and for them to gain a sense of superiority. Because when they are positioning themselves in front of you, and quite usually at quite a distance, they are symbolically putting themselves in a leading or dominant role and implying that they are more important and deserve to be at the forefront, which can make you feel inferior, as if you are always chasing after them, but you can never catch up. You aren't the equal partner. So it's a subtle yet powerful way of making the victim feel less, small, unacknowledged, without any direct confrontation. That is quite a marvelous manipulative tactic of theirs that I have seen for myself many times. Other weird and wonderful things that they do that we can attribute to narcissists and narcissism is they are constantly interrupting or talking over other people. So they like to bring the focus back to themselves and to keep the focus on themselves at all times. And this also shows a lack of respect for others' thoughts and a need to remain the center of attention. So they will hardly let you finish your thought or your sentence before they interrupt you or talk over you. Now, at first, this can be seen as they are on your side. They agree with everything you are saying, especially if you, met in the same scenario. In other words, you met at work or you met at college or university. If you complain about a lecturer or a professor that you had, then they will interrupt you. But at first, this behavior can be attributed to, oh yes, you also experienced this, a commonality. They also like to exaggerate minor achievements or skills. In other words, they, in their eyes, are the best at everything and anything, and it can be something trivial. But this is to create an inflated sense of importance, often at the expense of others' accomplishments. So let's say, for instance, there was an exam that was written, and you feel you did well in the exam. They will tell you, no, I did much better. And then when the results come, it actually reflects the complete opposite. But then it will be whoever marked the exam's fault in the narcissist's perspective. So they need to constantly reinforce that they are better at most everything. And that is where the engaging in one-upmanship comes from. So if you share a story or achievement, the narcissist will often respond with a story that's better or more dramatic to ensure that they are seen as superior. They also often ignore others in public or social situations. So they will deliberately and selectively ignore people, choosing to engage only with those that they deem beneficial or important, subtly diminishing those they see as less valuable. Often this behavior is demonstrated as deliberately turning their back towards somebody and having an engaging conversation with the person right in front of them and ignoring the person at the back of them. That is also a very subtle but deliberate move on their part. They will act distant or unavailable when you are happy. In other words, if something wonderful has happened in your life, they will become aloof when their partner is happy or succeeding, preferring to downplay or ignore positive moments to keep the focus on their own needs and emotions. And oftentimes they will have a sob story to make you feel unhappy when you are happy. So they will never celebrate your achievements with you, or hardly ever celebrate your achievements with you. The attention constantly needs to be on them. And in that said, they will seek constant affirmation for even the basic tasks. So things that the victim might take for granted and do within their day-to-day, the narcissist will frequently seek praise or compliments for things most people wouldn't expect recognition for, such as handling simple responsibilities to maintain a steady flow of validation. And this you typically see in the parent-child relationship. In other words, the narcissist will constantly seek praise for, let's say, having to change the child's nappy, or having given the child food or something to drink, which is a simple task, and it is included in the parenting task, but they will seek validation for these acts. So why did I talk about other odd behaviors? Because it is essential and it serves as a tactic to reinforce their control and their sense of superiority, reminding those around them of their perceived higher status. In other words, at all times they must be better than everybody else. And this also includes ruining special occasions. In other words, if it's not the narcissist's birthday, or let's say the family celebrates Christmas, or they go on holiday, the narcissist will ruin these special occasions by their behaviors. In other words, they will have a tantrum over something small or something silly, and they will cause distress by starting an argument or dismissing the significance of the occasion or simply acting disinterested. This is to reassert control and ensures the focus remains on their needs and emotions, leaving you feeling deflated and disappointed. So by spotting all of these patterns, you can start to identify how behaviors work to undermine your confidence, joy, and connection to others. And this allows the narcissist to maintain control and dominance in the most subtle ways. Let's continue with the next question. I just went to get a cardigan because it was getting a bit chilly in front of the camera. But before I address the next question, I can hear some of the audience members asking, why do I repeat myself so often? There's a very good reason for that. The reason is that the human brain, one of the ways that it learns and retains information is by repetition. Because if we keep hearing the same thing over and over, it goes and sits in our subconscious brain, and then it becomes second nature. So what I would like to teach the audience is that it should become second nature to you to recognize the narcissist in your life. That is the reason that I keep repeating myself. Also, why are my explanations so lengthy if I have said, but I can not possibly give you all the information there is about narcissism? The reasons that my explanations are lengthy is there is a lot of information to give out. So I try to give out, with the time constraint that I have, as much information as possible to empower you, the viewer, to make an informed choice and informed decision about your future ultimately. With that being said, let's continue to the next question that I received from another viewer. This question reads, excuse me, my partner seems to constantly complain about everything, from little things to major issues. Is this normal, or is this another way for them to control the situation? So the question is the complaining normal, or is it another way for them to control the situation? I would say both is true. It's normal, and it's a way for them to control the situation if they demonstrate narcissistic behaviors and tactics. That's the short answer. Now, fortunately, there is a lot to unpack in this question as well. So I am going to dive straight into it. First of all, I want to talk about the frequency of complaining. Now, remember, in one of my very first videos that I posted, I talked about the emotional frequency chart. And I took 20 minutes to explain to the viewer the emotional frequency chart. And in that chart that I explained, I talked about each emotion, each human emotion that we feel has a specific frequency which is measured and equates to a certain number on the scale of 1 to 1,000. Now, if you look at that scale, I don't think it specifically talks about the emotion of complaining, but needless to say, complaining has a specific frequency. And this can be very overwhelming in a narcissistic relationship, as it is really just a harmless quirk. The narcissist's often and constant complaining is a subtle form of control and setting the tone and demanding your attention or sympathy. the words they use can affect your mental and emotional state. It's almost like casting a spell, which is why we say the English language is called spelling. In other words, words cast specific spells. I'm going to say that again. We have to be careful about the wording that we use in any language, but specifically the English language. And that is why I speak slowly and deliberately, and I try to choose my language and my use of language intentionally. Because what I am doing by speaking is I'm casting a spell. Now, what spell am I trying to cast? I'm trying to cast a spell of healing and awareness and empowerment and upliftment. The narcissist, on the other hand, does not wish to cast such a spell. The narcissist wants to keep the victim under his or her control. And therefore, they use language as a method of casting a spell. So the more that you hear these negative words, whether they are complaining about you or complaining about somebody else, the more they wear down your defenses and start influencing your beliefs. So rewind that section and listen to it again if you must, because it is a very important piece of information. Narcissists rely heavily on words to create their version of reality. But remember, their words only have power if you believe their words. So I'm going to say that again. Their words only have power over you if you believe their words. If you step back and don't let their complaints take root, these words lose their weight and control over you. Instead of accepting every complaint as criticism or truth, let's rather use critical thinking to assess each statement on its own merits. Why is critical thinking important in this scenario? Remember, what the narcissist wants to do is they want to disarm your sense of being, your sense of that you are a sovereign being and that you have power over yourself. They want to disarm that completely. Why do they want to disarm that? So that they can have control over you. Now, critical thinking is a counter method to counter the narcissist's manipulative words and their spells that they cast over you. What words do we use to deploy critical thinking? In other words, instead of asking, what can I do to make the narcissist feel better? Or to what lengths must I go? Or why am I never good enough? You need to reframe your words so that, first of all, they can land more positively. In other words, you cast a more positive spell over yourself and you don't keep repeating what the narcissist is saying to you verbally in your head. In other words, the narcissist then lives rent-free in your head, even if you are no longer involved in a relationship with them. So critical thinking is important whether you are in a relationship with a narcissist or you are coming out of a relationship with a narcissist. The questions that we ask when we deploy critical thinking are the who, what, when, where, why, and then how. But they need to be used in a specific manner. So, who does this really benefit? Who does this statement really benefit that the narcissist is saying or has said? Is it towards the victim's benefit or is it towards the narcissist's benefit? That is the first question that you can ask. Who does this really benefit? The next question that you can ask is, what is their motive in saying this? Now, when you answer that question for yourself, the energy will immediately shift from casting a spell to disarming the spell. In other words, if you answer that question, what is their motive in saying this? As their motive is to manipulate or to gain control, then you disarm that spell. The next question that you can ask is, when do they complain the most? Is it only when you are happy or when they feel out of control? If you can answer that question for yourself, then you disarm the spelling that is cast. Where does the truth actually lie in this situation? Now remember, the word truth can be used in many different aspects, and it can also be abused in many different aspects. There is always my truth, in other words, my own personal truth that I have collected over the years due to my experience. Then there is your personal truth, which you have collected over the years due to your experience. Then there is the narcissist's personal truth, which is what he or she has collected over the years due to their personal experience. Then there is the truth of the situation. So the word truth is sometimes very loosely used and thrown around, even on social media. How do you know what is a truth and what is not for yourself? I'm now talking to victims that are currently experiencing narcissistic abuse or have experienced narcissistic abuse. Because remember, the narcissist wants to contaminate the victim's version of the truth. And he wants to manipulate the version of truth to suit himself or herself, the narcissist now. So how can the victim then establish what is the truth? Because in order to answer the question, where does the truth actually lie in the situation, you need to know what is the truth. And how do I know what the truth is? The short answer to that is the truth will make you feel calm and at peace. A lie will not. It will make you feel the opposite. So that is a very, very quick distinction that you can use in your life to decide, are the words that the narcissist is speaking the truth or not? Do those words bring me peace and calm, or do they bring me chaos and confusion? Then you know where the truth lies in the situation. And even if you just sit with yourself and you just speak statements out loud, any statements about yourself. I am safe. How does that statement make you feel? Does the statement make you feel at peace and calm, or does it not? Oftentimes with victims of abuse, that specific statement won't make them feel calm at first because their body does not recognize the vibration of safety because they are constantly in the fight or flight mode. I am beautiful. I am loved. I am worthy. How does that statement make you feel? Possibly the I am worthy statement will also not make you feel calm or at peace because your body does not recognize the vibration of that statement. But if you deploy the contrary, I am unworthy, how does that make you feel? You could recognize it as a truth because you have heard it so often during your relationship with a narcissist that your body feels that is the truth, but your heart knows that's not the truth. So that is the distinction that you can make with where does the truth actually lie in the situation. Then the last question that you can ask, or the second last question, is why are they trying to create a negative atmosphere? Why are they trying to create a negative atmosphere? That question is pretty self-explanatory. Then another question that you can ask, which is how can I maintain my own sense of reality and not get drawn into their narrative? Now, that's a difficult question to answer, so I'm not going to answer it for you. You can feel into that. You can pose the question to yourself. You can look at what I have taught you in this video, and you can employ some of the skills. You can use some of the skills that I've talked about and see if that helps you to maintain your own sense of reality and not get drawn into the narrative. Therefore, by analyzing words critically that you keep hearing, you start to reclaim control over your own perspective. Narcissists may try to spin their reality with their words, but the questioning and reflecting, you empower yourself to see beyond their complaints and protect your peace. Remember, the words only hold as much power as you give them. In other words, the moment you start believing the words, they have power over you. The moment that you no longer resonate with those words and you don't believe them, you have broken the power that the narcissist has over you. It sounds that simple. In reality, it takes a lot of work, but the conclusion is that it is that simple. Now, the frequency of complaining from a narcissist isn't just frustrating. It's a powerful tool that they use to shift the emotional balance in their favor. By questioning each complaint with a who, what, when, where, why, and how questions, you take back control over your own perspective, and you can try to negate the feelings of negativity, worthlessness, powerlessness, and resentment. I want to just add to this topic, which is quite a detailed topic, of emotional regulation. In other words, managing stress and resolving conflicts. Now, just remember, with a narcissist, you are never going to be right. You are always going to be wrong. So there will hardly ever be any resolution. So don't go into a disagreement expecting to be right and expecting to get out of the disagreement what you want and what is going to be in your favor. That will never happen. The only control that you have over is over yourself. You don't have control over the narcissist, and you certainly don't have control over their emotional dysregulation. So in other words, when they use statements like, I get angry because of what you did, or I need to behave this way because of what you did, first of all, recognize that as an untruth. Because my behavior, my emotional regulation, is not dependent on any event outside of me. That is easier said than done, because we live in a very fast-paced world, and it's fight or flight and survival of the fittest. And if I'm driving in my car down the road and somebody cuts in front of me, I might have a blow up and use a few curse words. But in that moment, I can also choose not to react. I can respond by saying, oh, maybe that person had a personal emergency, or they needed to get where they wanted to be quicker than I, so let them pass through. It's no skin off my back. But that person cutting in front of me is not responsible for my emotional regulation. I am responsible for my own emotional regulation. In other words, I have control over my feelings. I can control. Am I going to respond with rage? Am I going to respond calmly? Am I going to respond truthfully? And am I going to respond to my benefit? In other words, that I don't feel worse after the altercation or the discussion or whatever you want to call it, the conflict. I don't feel worse. I stated my boundary. I spoke my truth. And I'm not responsible for your reactions. Now, please, by all means, you cannot tell the narcissist, listen, I'm not responsible for you overreacting, because they don't understand it like that. Their whole world is made up of how other people respond to them and how other people perceive them, because that is what they have been taught from childhood. Emotional regulation can help mitigate the impact of stress by allowing us to process emotions calmly. By maintaining our emotions, we can handle unexpected stresses without feeling overwhelmed or burnt out, maintaining a more stable and resilient mindset. In other words, when that person cut in front of me, and I did respond with anger, and I did throw a few curse words, afterwards, when I'm calmer, I can go and sit back at that and look at that situation and think, could I have responded differently? Maybe in that moment I couldn't have, and that's also okay. But you can make the choice to respond differently next time. When trying to resolve conflict, strong emotional regulation helps us avoid defensive reactions or impulsive responses. Remember, the narcissist is driven by his impulses, his or her impulses. And their impulses dictate that they are always right and they are the best at everything, and nobody else can tell them otherwise. So emotional regulation allows us to communicate more constructively, seeking common ground and approach disagreements with a level-headed perspective that benefits everybody involved. Now, I know this is not possible with a narcissist, but think of it as you are approaching disagreements for your benefit, not for the narcissist's benefit, for your benefit only. So, some practical techniques that we can use for emotional self-regulation. Because in a situation with a narcissist, when you are in fight or flight the whole time, you also act impulsively, even though you feel horrible afterwards. Or you might take the bait that they are giving you and react over-emotionally. How you can counter this, there's a couple of techniques that you can use. First of all, you can set the boundaries, which is what I've spoken of previously. You can practice mindful breathing exercises. I know this sounds boring, but it is a method that definitely works, because if you do deep breathing exercises, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps calm the body down. So a simple technique that you can use, which you might know of, is to inhale for 4 seconds, and then hold the breath for 7 seconds and exhale for 8 seconds. If you've got one of those watches that track your heart rate monitor, you can actually see your heart rate start going down while you are using this breathing technique. And this can also help lower anxiety and increase focus. One of the other methods that you can use to regulate yourself emotionally is cognitive reframing. In other words, use those critical thinking questions. Remove the emotion from the situation, not while you are in the situation, afterwards. Remove the emotion from the situation and do cognitive reframing. In other words, is there another way to look at this manner? The example that I used of the driver cutting in front of you, another way to look at that was maybe he was in a hurry because he had a medical emergency, or he was on his way to a medical emergency. And then you can get a more neutral thought or a more positive thought that would reduce the stress and help you approach conflicts from a fresh angle. One of the other techniques that really work very well is to name and accept your emotions. Often, nobody teaches you about your emotions. So let's say, for instance, there are, I'm just using a number, 400 different emotions that the human body can experience. we might only know of 5 or 6. Angry, sad, mad, happy, anxious. Let's say those are the 5. You know that film where they do for the little kids, what's it called? That animated film where they display the emotions. They use the 5 or 6 emotions and then each character represents an emotion. I forget the name of the film. But what that film did is it used the 5 or 6 main emotions that kids, for instance, experience. But when you, for instance, experience the emotion of anger, it's a cover-up for another emotion. It's an easy emotion for the human body to recognize and feel, but it's a cover-up for a different emotion. In other words, maybe you are ashamed of something, and that is why you responded with anger. Maybe you feel guilt over something, and that is why you responded with anger. But anger is hardly ever the primary emotion that we feel when we are displaying anger. So a key concept would be, you can get it from the internet. They talk about the emotional wheel, which names all of the emotions that you can feel. And then you can decide for yourself, am I feeling angry? Yes, but not really. There's something underneath it. Then you can go and recognize other emotions: disappointment, resentment, anxiety, excitement. And the minute that you can name the emotion, the negative feeling attached to the emotion, if it's a negative emotion, it dissipates. So you've identified the emotion without judgment. For instance, you have said to yourself, I feel frustrated. And instead of repressing it, you allow the body to feel the frustration. And the emotion will take 2 minutes to move through the body. And then it's out of the body. If we don't name and feel the emotion remains stuck in the body. And it causes, at a later stage, dis-ease. In other words, the body will then not be at ease, disease. And it will also help you understand your emotions better. So this will also take some practice because we are not used to this, but it's a very valuable technique to use. And the other technique that you can use for emotional regulation is to pause and reflect before responding. So in other words, don't react, but respond. So when emotions are high, take a moment to pause before responding. You can say to the person that you are experiencing a high emotion with, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about this in 10 minutes time or 15 minutes time, or later when we are calm, we will address this. This will give you a moment to pause, and then during this time you can reflect on the outcome that you want. You can ask yourself if your intended response aligns with the outcome. This approach prevents knee-jerk reactions that might escalate conflicts. So you don't want to escalate the conflict with a narcissist unnecessary. There are other techniques that you can also use. I'm not going to go into that now because then the video is going to be too long. I have another question that I'm going to address in this video, and then I will leave you to it. The last question that I received from a viewer was, why do narcissists seem so charming and attentive at first, but then change drastically over time? Is this part of their manipulation? And how can I tell if someone is genuinely kind or just pretending? Now, this question opens up a discussion on the narcissistic cycle of idealization, devaluation, and discard, which is the emotional abuse cycle, which I have spoken about also briefly in a previous video. But just to answer this viewer's question, how can I tell if someone is genuinely kind or just pretending? Time, first of all, is your best friend in this instance. Over time, the mask will fall. If they are wearing a mask, if they are pretending, the mask will fall over time. So you cannot make this distinction within the first week or 2 or 3 or 4 within meeting somebody. Sometimes it can take up to 2 years for the mask to drop, especially if it's a love relationship. Why 2 years? Because 2 years is typically the honeymoon phase of any love relationship. So within the first 2 years, mostly everything is wonderful and the parties are so in love and they love on each other and everything they do for each other. But after 2 years, the honeymoon phase passes. This has been scientifically proven. It's not my own stories that I'm making up. So up until 2 years, you have scientifically to see, is this person genuine or are they just pretending? The pretense could fall away any period within that 2 years, depending on how skilled the narcissist is at manipulation. But watch for the pattern of manipulation and then watch for the mask to fall away. How will you know that the mask has fallen away? You will feel at that instance that the mask drops and they show you exactly who they are. You will be left feeling, what the hell just happened? Or what was that? That makes no sense at all. Their behavior makes no sense. Their words that they used make no sense. What the hell just happened? I can sum it up in that question. So then you will know they are manipulating you. Then just to speak to the question, why do they seem so charming at first and then change? The narcissist uses a cycle of abuse. All of them do, whether they know it or not. It is the cycle of idealization or the honeymoon phase, devaluation, and discard. In the idealization phase, everything is wonderful. They display intense charm and attention. That's the narcissist. Love bombing. They shower their target with praise, affection, and promises of a perfect future. And the goal is to create a powerful bond quickly, making the other person feel special and desired. Often during this phase, they will also express the desire to make the relationship permanent very quickly. In other words, we need to get married now. We need to get married soon. Let's get married soon. They will use the word marriage very early on in the relationship. They will also use phrases like, I've never met anybody like you. Nobody has ever made me feel the way that you do. All my exes were crazy. Those are typical phrases that they use in the idealization phase. So why do they do this? They work to secure control and devotion. The flattery, attention, and seemingly deep interest are meant to create emotional dependence, ensuring that the target becomes invested in the relationship. Then comes the devaluation phase. So once the narcissist feels secure in their control, their behavior starts to change. The once attentive partner may begin to criticize, ignore, and belittle their target. The change can be gradual or sudden, but usually leads to confusion, self-doubt, and anxiety for the victim. In other words, what the hell just happened? Why do they do this? Because the narcissist craves admiration and control, and they also tire of their partner once the person's novelty wears off or once the partner starts to show independence or disagreement as well. Devaluation serves to reinforce their power, keeping the victim keeping the victim unstable and dependent on the narcissist for validation. That's the second phase. The third phase, the discard phase, where they throw you to one side like you are a piece of rubbish. When the narcissist no longer sees value in maintaining the relationship, or when the partner starts resisting their control. they may abruptly end the relationship or become distant. Sometimes the discard phase is temporary, and the narcissist may attempt to return to start the cycle again. Why does the narcissist do this? The discard phase allows the narcissist to maintain their sense of superiority. They often move on to new sources of admiration, which is known as supply, in inverted commas, while leaving their past partner feeling broken and questioning what went wrong. Why do they seem so kind at first? It is to gain trust and secure admiration as soon as possible. As soon as possible. How to tell if someone is genuinely interested or just pretending? Like I said, consistency over time. So give it max 2 years. Are they displaying signs of empathy and listening? They could at first. They could pretend to feel empathy and to listen, but they will struggle to maintain this facade over time, especially if they are not the center of attention. How they handle criticism is another dead giveaway. So a genuine person will respect your feelings, while a narcissist may become defensive and try to turn the situation around to make you feel guilty.